Welcome to the HR on the Offensive podcast, a weekly podcast by Lace Partners, a fundamentally different HR and payroll consultancy. Each week, we tackle some of the most interesting topics facing senior HR professionals. So whether that's from employee value proposition, performance management, people strategy, or even payroll, we cover it all. So join us for the next 30 minutes. And if you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Now, on with the show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners, as always, joining you to host today's really interesting chat. It actually relates to an article that was in the Wall Street Journal that I read in May. And that was the story that if you're listening to this and you are a HR professional, then you may have read it as well. Moderna was merging its HR and IT departments, and it caused quite a lot of noise in the business press, not least because I think it's fair to say that the traditional perceptions of the HR and the IT function are quite different. So what I thought I'd do is kick around a little bit of a chat around Moderna's kind of approach towards this. What they've been saying publicly is, of course, that the role of AI and its impact is inevitably changing the way in which they plan and deliver their workforce aspirations to meet their business objectives. But I think there's lots of different avenues and angles that we can unpick on this. In order to do that, first of all, I need a co-host, and that's Julian Holmes from Lace. How you doing, Julian? You all right?
Hi, Chris. How you doing?
And we welcome back a friend of the show and somebody who we've had on the pod before. It is John Dye, who is the CEO of Simply Get Results. How you doing, John? You all right?
Doing very well. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Very good, very good. So the tradition that we have on the pod is that we go for a completely random question that is not related to anything to do with HR or IT or Moderna in this instance. I'm going to hit you both with this. I'm going to let Julian go first. It'll be fine. It was an article about, in Australia, a flight that was delayed for 2 hours because they found a snake on a plane. Now, if you're of a certain age, you'll remember that movie from Samuel L. Jackson called Snakes on a Plane. And it got me thinking, is there one animal that if somebody said it was on the plane, I would not only want it delayed, but probably want to get off of it? I actually really hate snakes. So mine would be boring and it would be snakes. You can't have snakes. You can have an animal of any size, though, Julian, like rhinoceros, if you like. But what sort of animal are you picking and why?
The only animal I'm actually really, really terrified of, it's not a real animal at all. It's the aliens from the film Alien, like I found terrifying. So yeah, all you need is some of those things skittering on the floor and sort of leaping at you. The only experience I had in my life that was similar to that was when I went to the Malaysian jungle, Taman Negara, and there were so many leeches and they started flacking towards us like sort of little springs, basically. So yeah, the aliens or failing that, leeches, I think would be my Samuel Jackson.
Leeches on a plane. John, can you better that? So give us your answer and then tell us a little bit about Simply Get Results.
Well, I've got 2 young kids and we read a book called You Can't Fit an Elephant on the Bus. And in that, you are told that you can't fit a giraffe on an aeroplane. So I feel it has to be a giraffe. There just simply isn't the height.
Love it. Love it. So tell us a little bit about Simply Get Results.
We help organizations to understand the skills and capabilities they need to deliver their business goals. We call that helping them get the right skills. And as a workforce planning professional by background, my view is that skills transformation or talent intelligence or skills intelligence is all a modern riff on a fairly established concept, which is being clear on the workforce plan that delivers your business goals. We use data, insight, and a spot of services to help organizations think that through, put in place the right data and insight, and then actually close their skill gaps to get the workforce they need.
So let's just kick off. I'll start with you, John. Let's talk about this discussion. I want to get your initial thoughts on when you read the article and you've heard the stories about this idea of HR and IT departments merging as one. So some general thoughts on that. And then I think also probably a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of how businesses are interacting with AI and the impact that it's having on their workforce and their workforce planning.
Well, my first reaction was to think of all of the HR and IT processes that a chief people officer or CTO wouldn't want to take from their counterpart. So I don't know how many chief people officers I've met with who really, really wanted to own IT distribution and onboarding, for example. But, there's work that needs to be done, and it's important work. I think actually the article is a good trigger for a conversation about which people with what knowledge and experience need to come together to make smart decisions about technology, in this case AI, and its impact on the business, and how to unlock that impact. And professional workforce planning practitioner in me thinks that workforce planning can help you unlock that. So I'm going to put my bias on the table. But it might be that you need to create a new framing for that conversation, a new organizational structure, a new way of encouraging people to be stimulated and think about things differently. And if that's behind the thinking there, or behind other examples that come to mind, then great. They've clearly decided this is something so important, they need to organize about it in a different way and think about it in a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think for most organizations, though, they're unlikely to decide, hey, let's smash some functions together under a single leader. It's much more likely to be a continuation of the expertise in those separate fields. But the join up between them has never been more important than it is right now. So my simple value chain in my head is that most transformations are technology originated or driven. Most technology transformations are going to be about the deployment of artificial intelligence, old-fashioned AI and new-fashioned generative solutions. And most technology implementations fail not because of shiny technology, but because of the people implications of those. So if transformation requires technology and technology requires people, then that is a chain that HR and IT stakeholders need to work together very closely in order to unlock productivity.
John, one of the things is where we see the world of work changing, and perhaps maybe, I don't know if you've got examples from your clients or the work that you've been doing recently about the range of different types of thinking that are going on in some of your clients at the moment around how work is being transformed by traditional tech programs, but also some of the new technologies, like language modules and AI.
Yeah, so I'm going to come at this through what we see, but also what we've heard organizations doing that might be a little bit different from the standard template. So I think one of the challenges is that it's very easy to kind of step forward from where you are today and to use new technology to deliver improved outcomes or to optimize or to automate things you can see and feel and experience today. It's just inherently easier. And that's mostly what we see. Organizations are using the new technology to automate the writing of SKU descriptions in a retail environment. They're using it to improve medical imaging and how they communicate the outcome of those traditional machine learning models to non-expert audiences like patients.
Yeah, and maybe, I know one of the things that you and I were just exchanging some messages on sort of like yesterday is looking at some of the technologies that look at how you can break down tasks within work and look at which of those tasks are potentially impacted by AI. And maybe you could just talk about some things that you've seen in the market around that area.
Yeah, I think there's a chain to go through, and it's worth saying that there's nothing wrong with automating and optimizing your current work, because that needs to be done, and it might unlock the opportunity to do some of that more creative, longer term thinking. So how are people approaching that? It's requiring them to get specific on how work gets done today, and organizations are investing in working that out at scale rather than perhaps working it out by process or by function in a way that you might have traditionally done it in an operating model or a workforce planning initiative, because you require that visibility across your organization in order to make decisions that are not constrained by your current paraphernalia and organization structure and all that jazz. So what's becoming known as a kind of task intelligence or work intelligence lens is a tool to help you understand how work gets done today. How might that change as we step forward through new technology? You can overlay on that task architecture or taxonomy and the extent to which you can unlock productivity improvements through automating or augmenting that task with modern artificial intelligence technologies as it currently stands. Of course, that frontier will continue to shift. That implies to me that this is a capability that organizations need, whether it sits in HR or IT is a secondary question, but a way of thinking and a data set and an analytical thought process that can help unlock productivity. And I think it's important to know it's all of the above rather than a technology solution that is one and done.
Yeah. And maybe, John, bringing it back to workforce planning, which is, a passion of both you and I, is it's beginning to, would you agree it's beginning to cast a new light on how you think about the demand side of workforce planning? And maybe you could just explore that a little bit more for us.
Demand has always been the hardest part of workforce planning, in my view, because it's the business forecast and translating that into stuff you can plan around, stuff you can close gaps around. And my frustration as a workforce planner always used to be that it was difficult to get beyond the financial element of that. But of course, the financials are just a result of the work that needs to get done and the amount you pay the people who do that work, or the amount you invest in capital and automation in order to deliver that work. So these questions are, in one way, as old as time, but the data set and the insight we now have means that there has never been a better time to be able to answer those questions. You can go further, faster, you can experiment, you can try different scenarios in a way that would have been really quite difficult to do even 5 years ago. So I think that implies a few things. I think it means that today's workforce planning practitioners and the people they engage with need to exist in a few different states or different lenses when they're considering their plans. And it is impossible to know the impact of technology in 5 years' time. So therefore, working out your future tasks in 5 years and working back is almost a necessarily imprecise future that might change by the time you get there. So there's value in stepping forward from today and being confident in the things you know are going to change and what that means for your workforce plan, but acknowledging there's grey that we don't know the outcome to. And that requires you to have a almost scenario-based reflection on the future. And that doesn't need to be hugely complicated, but it just means you need to ask yourself different questions and use data to help paint those potential scenarios and their implications. It implies having different levels of confidence in different areas of your plan. You will be really confident about some stuff, the capabilities you need to build in order to have even a chance of succeeding and competing against your competitors and peers in the future, even if you don't know the specificity of which individual job and skill will require to deploy that in 5 years' time. It is still helpful to have things you're very confident in and the planks of your plan that you can then build detail at the appropriate point in time around. Really difficult to hold these multiple lenses in your head at any one time. So you have to create the space, I think, to do experimental creative thinking about your future workforce and your business strategy and how those can be aligned. And perhaps not constrain yourself by the current financial forecasting process that you clearly need to also contribute to, because that's how your business runs and manages its performance today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so when we started off talking about the Moderna piece. And one of the questions that I had in my head when I was reading it was, is this just effectively a fancy way of saying, well, we're just going to make efficiencies and cuts and, that's why we're going to remove some of our workforce. But what I find really interesting, which is what you were just talking about there, John, which I'd like you to just open up and explore a little bit. It sounds to me, because you were talking about, we don't even know what the technologies in 5 years' time are going to be. Surely, as a business, one of the levers that you need to focus and zone into, and you started talking about the capability side, is okay, well, the people that we've got, how can we get people who are agile enough that they can then start evolving themselves, learning new skills, capabilities as we start to go in a certain direction? Let's find people who have the right mindset that can adapt and be agile. Is that one of the key things that you think in terms of a future planning? Is imagine if we can find a collective of people entering into our workforce who have that agility, that we can then mold them as our requirements change, whether that's the type of technology we need or what have you.
Well, as a career generalist, I'm going to say that generalists will rule the world eventually, but I don't know that everybody will agree with me. I think there's a couple of ways of coming at that one. So if you think of your organization as a system of how things get done and work and people and technology and money all contribute to achieving that outcome, then I think your system needs to live and breathe and to be agile as its conditions change, as your market performance dictates, as your business strategy changes, as you react to competitors in the market, as the labor market flexes and becomes tighter or looser. Having the ability to respond to that effectively would seem like a no-brainer, particularly in an inherently uncertain world from all of the different ways in which you can look at that, political and economic and so on and so forth. However, there is not an infinite supply of general agile people available, nor is it the right answer in totality. So I think it comes back to being really clear on where actually you have confidence that the specifics will still be required in the future, and therefore putting a fence around those and saying, that's great. We have high confidence that we are going to need deep experts in nuclear technology or marine biology or whatever it is for your business. But there's a slightly grayer group of people, capability, money, resources that we're going to make a bet on. And it's not a bankrupt the business bet, but if we're going to invest in 3 capabilities, we're very confident it's A, B, and C. We're less confident about D, but we'll keep a watching eye on that. And it's proven that organizations who make deliberate investments in their people as in a transformation context, which will be pretty much everybody in the next 10 years, achieve better productivity outcomes as a result of those deliberate and intentional investments. And all they're doing is making bets about which talent, which skills, which capability is most likely to help them achieve that outcome, which then helps them and everybody else in HR and L&D and in the business to act with greater certainty and precision in the work they do every day, to hire that person, to encourage mobility, to retain that person and make them an offer when perhaps they would otherwise have left the door, to not make people redundant on one hand and then rehire people with similar capability or different on the other. So I think having a plan that keeps the business relevant enables your actions to therefore be relevant, even if you don't have the same degree of confidence across all elements of that plan.
And I suppose, like, building on the other piece, the other interesting about the Moderna story is merging HR and IT is potentially merging functions that might have quite different cultures. And I think we've already spoken, John, about the importance of understanding work and task and how that might be transformed. We've talked about the importance of having people with the right skill set. What are the key skills that we need to be able to deliver the most business value? I just wonder what you think about that, whether you would agree or you've got views on the sort of third element, which is the sort of the cultural piece. So it's kind of interesting that the decision that Moderna made was we have to slam these 2 functions together. Another solution, which I think you alluded to, was, well, we could have just tried to figure out how we work more effectively across functions to answer some of these key business questions. So just interested in the role you think that culture might play in businesses' ability to adapt and, frankly, create the most value from AI.
I think it's really important to call out that you're very likely to be joining 2 different cultures together, whether that's a project or a transformation, or you're merging those business units together. And then my reflection on our discussion actually is that the task and the work angle on this is very logical. It's very engineering. It's let's put the bricks in front of us and then let's build the house, or knock it down and build a slightly different house. Sorry
to interrupt. IT being very well positioned to think about that sort of piece. Yeah.
But labour market data would suggest or prove that when organizations try to recruit AI talent in specialist AI roles, they pay more for people who have both the technical expertise and the complementary skills that allow you to unlock that technical expertise in an organization. Ethical behavior and standards, analytical thinking, so on and so forth. And I think some of those speak to the culture that will enable an organization to exploit and thrive in an AI-powered market. My hypothesis would be, being intentional about that, you need both the skill set and the mindset and the tool set in order to be able to unlock technology. And that will be even more true of AI, where it inherently challenges some of the ways in which we think about work and how we create and how we generate output, productivity and value. The culture of the organization and the values that you as an individual have when you engage with others using content you've generated in a way that is fundamentally new. If you're not using your values to guide that and the culture of the organization to deliver that, then I think you run the risk of doing something that you shouldn't in terms of the legality or the regulatory side of things, in the expectation and relationship you've built with your customer base.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm even thinking about just the ways of working, about the ability to get people to collaborate with different skill sets, with different perspectives, with different professional backgrounds, to be able to leverage and take advantage of these technologies. And at the end of the day, to outcompete right? And it does feel like, thinking about various clients we've been working with, certainly some of them are facing up to not competitors in the sense of people they think traditionally are who've entered their market and are trying to compete on price or brand or proposition per se, but actually they're coming up with quite different offerings, quite different propositions. I think everybody aware of things like the impact that TikTok Marketplace is having on the way that people buy various things at the moment. And therefore, just the agility, organization agility that's required to be able to respond quickly to changing trends, changing market demand. And I think that will also be interesting, is that it does just merging IT as a function, which not always, but typically tends to take quite long-term views on things, and HR, which tends to be a bit sometimes responsive, let's put it like that, is where's the innovation, where's the agility, where's the speed part of that? And I think that to me, not to say that Moderna aren't thinking about that entirely, but I think for other organizations are sort of, thinking about this space, this opportunity space and this problem space, is how do they, alongside the kind of the view of the work and having the right tool set, having the right skill set, but also how do they create the right culture to take advantage? I think it's a super interesting area.
Thinking about some of the conversations we've had with CTOs or the HR stakeholders who face off to CTOs, CEOs, and senior stakeholders in traditional IT functions, my question would be, hey, we've had Agile HR for a decade. We've been practicing our agility. And when we speak to Agile leaders in engineering functions, they're like, yeah, of course we need to think about the skill set and the tool set we need to get work done. That's my job. That's what Agile means. We have a process around working that out. And I think we're talking about making that more intentional and perhaps elevating some of those principles to an organizational capability that someone should facilitate and own. So if you think about our skills-powered angle on the world, and skills-powered is really just about working out what things you need in order to get work done effectively and nurturing that culture and environment in which that happens. Our conversations would suggest that CTOs just fundamentally get that. They inherently think about their future time horizons in terms of their technology roadmap, and they decompose that into the resources required to deliver it, of which people are one. And we've been kicking around the idea of a kind of tech skills roadmap, because we think that's what every CTO needs, is the ability to say, hey, the risk associated with this technology that we're implementing in this part of the business and the work we're doing over here to experiment with AI is A, B, and C, because ultimately this is both a culture and a business outcome thing, but these are very senior leaders who need to manage cost and risk and governance inherently. So taking a balanced view across those lenses and being able to articulate that, I think is a really important thing that CTOs and senior HR leaders need to be able to do.
Really, really interesting. And we're almost out of time. I've got just one question, which actually I think it's for both of you. But we'll start with John and I'll finish off with you, Julian. Is we've talked a lot around this being, well, we've looked at this Moderna case study, if you like, as being perhaps a little bit of an isolated incident. You've got a CPR or a CHRO who has been well versed in multiple digital transformations. So I've read a few articles off the back of this saying, well, this person is quite unique in terms of their capability to lead this sort of joint function. How many people can do both? So I guess my final sort of question is really to look at, based on other types of businesses, if we divorce ourselves from the Moderna instance, how many businesses are ready to start having that mindset shift? And if we take it away from even IT and HR, because we've talked a lot about capabilities and agility and looking forward 5 years and how you can't predict the future, how many businesses do you guys think that you speak to are really in that position where they can take advantage of that in terms of, well, we can flip the way in which we start thinking about how work is done rather than who does the work? Actually, Julian, I'm sure you've got a few viewpoints on that, and then we'll finish off with our guest.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've had some, as we've been, building out our workforce transformation offering, we've been having loads of fantastic conversations. One of my favorite was how one of the organizations responded to the COVID pandemic. They had a very skilled workforce. Their business was highly dependent upon servicing businesses with offices. So clearly the demand for their services fell away. And it was just, their chief people officer told this great story about how the CEO said, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. How can we take the people we've got and the skill set we've got and deploy them against the right market? Probably just a client confidential. I won't go into what they did, but now they have an incredibly successful business using the skills of the workforce they have, but in an entirely different marketplace. And I think that sort of creative thinking, that sort of willingness to not just follow the gut reaction, the easy next move, but to create some time to pause and reflect and think about, actually, great, we've got this new changing context, we've got these pressures, whatever they might be, but are there more creative solutions? Are there different ways of thinking about how we create value, either for our existing customers and markets, but maybe there are new customers and markets that we could be servicing? So I would say, I can think of 2-3 other examples. Yes, the optimized play around AI is super important. There is no choice around it. But conversation with the clients about what new opportunities does this create? How can you use your brand, your footprint, all the assets you have today and deploy them in a different way to create value, I think is just as valid a question as how can you optimize and be more efficient?
John, final word from you.
I think organizations that inherently have a forward view of demand, some degree of confidence, are well positioned to be able to think and act in a concerted way here. So I think of organizations we work with across defense, engineering and aerospace, for example. They have decent visibility of what's coming up, but have not necessarily built the muscle to be able to translate that into the traditional work and people that would have been required to do that in the past. And then to translate that into, well, what does that look like in an increasingly technology and AI powered future? What are our options and scenarios there? I think industries where they have a little bit of future demand have got good foundations for this way of thinking. And I had a reflection on your kind of positioning statement, Chris, which is we've kind of focused on enterprise organizations, but for some of those big SMEs or mid-market organizations where they might not be blessed with the luxury of massive HR IT teams separately, and this is what a COO is for. It's to bring together disparate capabilities and functions to get them to bloody well operate and drive outcomes. And some of the most impressive leaders in COO functions I've seen have been genuinely strategic, thinking, proactive investors in resources and talent and people in the broadest sense of the term. And whether you have that job title or whether that's your mindset of a leader, I think that the Moderna example points towards a more connected thinking across different traditional functions and disciplines. And I would argue that you need data and insight in order to effectively join those together and make smart decisions.
Yeah, and that's a really, really good bookend to finishing up the podcast today. John, it's been absolutely amazing having you on. Thank you very much for joining us once again on the pod.
Just my pleasure.
Julian, thanks for co-hosting with me.
Been a pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to John.
Yes, hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to find out a little bit more about other guys that Simply Get Results, or as John said for short, Simply, then reach out to him on LinkedIn. It's John Guy. Company is Simply Get Results. You can find them just by doing a simple search. Your website, John, is that simplygetresults.com?
That is us.
So check out the guys from there. Hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I've enjoyed chatting with the two gents. From myself, from John and from Julian, thank you very much for joining me. And we will catch you next time on the HR on the Offensive podcast. Bye-bye.